Good morning, friends and learners on the interwebs. I'm Rachael Blaske. Oh, I don't hear you. You're muted.
And I'm Julie Ahern.
It's gonna be awesome today. Today's topic, we're talking about retail, and Julie and I, veterans of the board game industry, will chat with Rebecca Banky over a good cup of coffee and discuss this topic that we feel is an important part of running a board game publishing company. All the while discussing your comments and questions in the live chat below, because you're invited. Best.
This week is sponsored by Arcane Wonders, publishers of the Dice Tower Essentials line of games, including Onitama, Smartphones Inc., Aquatica, the brand new Sherlock 13, a light deduction game for 2 to 4 players where anyone could commit the crime, and coming right now very soon, Four Gardens, which is also delightful and new and shiny and wonderful to play. You can get all of these things available at your friendly local game store or wherever you buy games.
Oh, awesome. And if you can share this stream, I can tell it's already going to be amazing. So, we appreciate it. Do the thing. Awesome. And the news.
All right, so let's start with, there was quite a bit. So there have been some updates in convention land, talking about the different conventions, what they've been doing. But as a publisher, if you're watching this live or in the next couple days, the headlines for dates is that hotel blocks are opening this week for Gen Con, next week for Origins. Make sure that you've gotten your stuff. Make sure you're on the lookout. Because, yes, there will probably be a lower number of people attending this year, but that probably means there are a lower number of hotels, safety-wise, you don't know how big the blocks are. So make sure that you're getting your hotel things in, and please be mindful of whether or not your people coming have been vaccinated, what their comfort level is with sharing rooms. A lot of times for companies, people are okay and comfortable with going 4 people to a room, and this year maybe not. So check in with your teams, check in with your people, make sure everybody who's coming is what their comfort level is, so you're not catching anybody unawares, and book those hotel rooms. So that's the big one for both Gen Con and Origins. I will say that also for Origins, we were talking about some of the recent things that have been happening in the industry. A lot of things are shifting legislation-wise back to less restrictive, but the plan is in place for what it would have looked like even if they aren't as restrictive. So enforcing masks and all of that, and that plan has already been put in to be approved by the state and by the city. So I think regardless of whether the city itself by then is more lax in how they're handling things, Origins will be more so enforcing mask rules, and also the convention center has upped its game and making sure things are safe. So the full plan is also been released so that you can see it in the newsletter, but there are going to be things like putting up barriers so that you're walking one direction one way and walking the other direction another way, keeping those lanes set up, things like that.
I'm terrible at that at the grocery store.
Right. But these are not just like the arrows, they're going to have like full on.
The people like on the runway, like.
Yeah, that'd be great. With these headphones, I'm just going to loan them these.
Yes, exactly. This way.
So upping the safety, but also we at Origins are looking to, based on recent conversations about, so people are coming back together and talking about having safe spaces, and the conversation about having some place that isn't a bar being a gathering place that is available and more of a default than going to the bar, which understandably, especially at Origins, there's the the bar on 2, which is the second floor of the adjoining hotel, is a very easy and convenient, and it's open until late. So it's understandable why it has become the default gathering place.
Right.
However, there has been a lot of conversation about how that is not necessarily safe for all people, and not fair for those people who do not want to consume alcohol. So Origins is looking at finding a different space to be the late night hangout spot to make available for networking and, just casual hangout. I brought up, and so I'm using my platform, guys, for the first time ever. I'm shamelessly using my platform. Go spread the word. I would like Jenny's Splendid Ice Cream to sponsor it.
Yes.
If we can make that happen, I would be so happy.
Jenny's.
That is an editorial. It's not news. But if I can't use this show for Jenny's Splendid Ice Cream, what am I doing? All right, moving on.
The best. Today is gonna be amazing.
That's
okay.
Moving on.
That didn't just happen.
Right. Origins, the Gamma board met last night.
Yes.
In addition to talking about the Grand Gamma trade show and the Origins and the other convention, the retailer convention that Rebecca's going to tell us all about. And yes.
Gamma Expo?
No, not Expo. Yes.
Oh, are you talking about Alliance? Okay.
No, I'm not.
Okay, never mind. This is a beautiful mess today. I love it. This is great. Okay, so is that the end of the news then, or
in addition to talking about that, we also talked about how this month is Mental Health Month, and on the Gamma website, we are offering services and that are non-for-profit for people to talk to if in general stress of the pandemic, but also for retailers who are having to deal with where their store is opened or closed or on a rotating schedule of that and how they are coping with the stress of that, things like that. And we are talking about incorporating environment initiatives because also that is becoming a bigger topic in the industry. So that is the news.
Way to go, Gamma, cutting edge. Love it. All right.
It wasn't just all ice cream, all right?
I mean, I got real distracted about the ice cream. I was like, wait, are we still doing the news?
Some serious stuff too.
I'm so confused. Okay, cool. All right. So just to remind you all, and last week I even updated this, that it's not just clicking the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner anymore. There is now a fancy little bell up there, just like YouTube, and you can click there to be notified every time we go live. We also have the link to our YouTube account in the description box below, so you can subscribe and view our archive shows after streaming. Okay, guys, our guest is amazing, and she already made me cry before we even got started today because she was being so sweet, and I adore her. So, okay, that was not the official introduction. Okay,
you can do it. I believe in you.
I met Rebecca Banky when I posted for some feedback on developing a newsletter for the distributor and retailer communication I was doing for Wise Wizard Games at the time. She was the first to give helpful hints, and I reached out to her personally. She, again, gave of herself to review my draft and gave me tips to keep retailers in the know, but not bored. Later, when I was developing a retailer direct sales program, again, she not only gave me amazing feedback, but she challenged me to do better. I love her. I adore her. She's going to teach us a ton today. And everybody, here is Rebecca Banky.
Hey,
Hi.
folks.
Hello,
Thanks so much for having me on the show. I'm very, very excited to be here. And thanks for that very lovely introduction.
Thank you for being, someone I was happy to write that for.
I approve of the editorial re-ice cream. I think that's an excellent option.
All right.
And I think it's a good conversation to be having about just how much do we need alcohol to be involved in our networking, especially when we're dealing with power dynamics, consent issues, and non-drinkers who exist 100%. In the world.
And even more than that, and because all of that, and then on top of that, we've been isolated, and it's stressful to be we're all feral and we're being
Mhm.
reintegrated into society, and that is an additional stress. And what brought it to the forefront of my mind, even before people were talking about it, was the thought of how likely to use it as a crutch it could become
Mm.
for soothing your anxiety, for like, and then that, like, that's also just not a healthy thing, because
Sure.
so that was something that made me think about it, versus
Yeah.
on top of everything else, that it's even a higher likelihood right now.
Yes. I
I
love that we are even having the conversation, no matter how it was brought up, and that we're using it to advance ourselves, to be a more safe and inclusive industry. So
I will say that, like, I'm planning to attend Origins, and I like a glass of red wine at the end of an evening, or a whiskey with some friends who are enjoying those things together. I love those things too,
Mhm.
but acknowledging the need for safe spaces and alternative venues for spending time together, and also the potential for dangerous power dynamics if you're going to demand of people that they participate in the somewhat coercive practice of needing to be involved in drinks to network, that is not an attack on me as a person who likes to drink sometimes.
right.
Right. Oh
Right.
yeah,
And it
absolutely.
needs to be
Same.
acknowledged as such, right?
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Oh my gosh, this is gonna be a great episode. Introduce yourself. What do you do in the industry? I cannot wait.
Yeah, so I'm Rebecca Banky, as we've already established before, and it says in the little placard below. I'm the retail manager at Canadian store Black Knight Games. You can find us at blackknightgames.ca because we're Canadian. Our store has been operating for coming up on 16, 17 years, somewhere in that neighborhood, so a good chunk of time. In that time, our owner, Jay, has been the sole proprietor for the entire time, and he and I have managed operations together for the last, coming up on 10 years now. So it's a real labor of love. I really do enjoy my work, and I really like what we do. We've got a good team of around 10 staff, little rotation somewhere in there, and we used to run an enormous number of events. Right now, we're primarily operating just as a retail store, and mostly for just curbside pickup and web orders because of the circumstance of the last year. But prior to that, and looking forward, we ran summer camps for kids to teach them Dungeons and Dragons. We ran board game nights, event nights, all of the kind of customer-facing experiences that get the kind of products that publishers are excited to talk about on your show into the hands of customers who are excited to play them in their homes.
Awesome. Oh, perfect.
So clearly, as exemplified right there, running a store has as many hats as being a small publisher.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the frontward store facing, speaking to the customer piece of it. There's also the logistics,
Yeah.
purchasing games, wholesale shipping, retail, like all of it. So what would you say, what percentage of a retail store's time goes to what, or a rule of thumb, rough estimate?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's a little bit difficult sometimes for me to completely have my finger on, because my role is very different from the sort of average role of someone working at our shop. Most of my time gets sucked back into spending at an office, or these days in my home office, filling out spreadsheets, calling distributors, placing customer orders, making sure that when you come in and say, hey, I want this kind of esoteric game that I don't see on your walls, I get to say, well, we've curated a catalog of 1,000 games, but we have tens of thousands available to us if we just talk with our distribution partners and order those things. So that's a big part of my job. There's also the HR part of making sure you're treating respectfully, especially in the circumstances of the last year where things have been really dangerous and challenging, a team of people who trust me with their safety, right? I had a friend in the industry die very recently of COVID, and he was working in a work environment that a lot of people have pointed to and said shares some culpability for the circumstances surrounding that. So that is the kind of thing that weighs heavily on me, that I have a responsibility to protect my team.
Right.
In real answer to your question, Julie, I think if you're not spending a good chunk of time talking to the your customers. If you're not engaging with people, demoing games, running events, and making them feel connected to the product that you have there, you need to examine that really critically. And that's not true at an individual level necessarily, but your team has to be doing that. So I'd say as much as 60 or 70% of the time has to be really engaged directly with the customer's needs. And the rest of that, there just aren't enough hours in the day sometimes, but you have to plan for expansion, plan for renovation, file your taxes, budget things accordingly, assess staff needs, schedule vacation time, create schedules, do orders. All of the things that you really need to do to make sure a business operates.
Run a board game store, they said. It'll be fun, they said.
You just play all day, they said. Yes.
Well,
yeah.
But the play part, I love, and I just talking a little bit more about it. The reaching out to customers, and you're saying 60, 70% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
What does that reaching out look like ideally?
Well, it can look a lot of different ways, and I think that's important to acknowledge because a lot of people say, well, standard retail sales stuff. Person walks into your store for the first time, might be a little bit intimidated by the space. You make some verbal acknowledgement the moment they step into the store. You give them a little bit of space to wander around. Within the first couple of minutes, you go over to them, you approach them, you have a conversation. It's open-ended questions. It's engaged. It's non-threatening. It's about other things. It's asking them what connects them to the hobby, what gets them excited about the community, how much interest they have, what's happening. It's leaving presumptions at the door. We run a training exercise and have in the past where I give everybody a two-sided cue card and we role play customers. And one side is what you get to see, person wearing this t-shirt with this attitude. And on the back, they have their secret agenda, which is, I really want to play Catan. I played it with some friends last week and I want to get a copy for myself. I don't know the name and all I remember is there were sheep and drinking. And they have to figure that out. And sometimes that's the puzzle, right? Sometimes that's what a customer engagement looks like. You have someone who is looking for an experience, they're looking for a need, and they're looking for you to solve a problem for them. And there can be a lot of different solutions to that problem. But also, I've been in stores before where I've walked in and I haven't fit their mold for customer and I don't get the same treatment or service. And I think our store prides itself in a really big way on making sure that you don't have to look a particular way to love games.
Oh my God.
I know.
Look. All right.
You good, Julie?
I'm good.
I told you she was good. I'm so excited. Okay, cool. So obviously customers are huge. Like that is a big deal as part of that. Now what we can do, many things that have been tried, and I've had this conversation with you before, but what things
we've had this conversation too.
Do publishers do to that are constantly successful at helping us get our games to sold, like just getting it to your customer and into their hands and then to your checkout?
Well, that's a really nice transition, Rachel, of course, because as we just said, I have to spend a lot of time talking to customers, or my staff do. Our team overall has to spend a really large portion of their time just talking to people and help them understand what they're looking for. I need to spend a lot of my time asking that customer what they're looking for, which means I don't necessarily have a ton of time to learn about every single game that's in the industry or check 1,000 emails, although I do.
Yeah, you do.
So it's really important for publishers to have tight, well put together selling guides. That's really useful for us. I'm looking for the kind of thing that's going to give me the spirit of the game, the sort of essence of the experience, and be able to translate that into selling. It's ideal if my staff have played the game and can really talk a customer through it. And our successful titles are big selling titles that often publishers can enter into the category of are the ones that I do train my staff on. I do make sure they've played, and we do sit down and say, oh, you haven't played this? You really must. Here's how to play it. Here's what we do. But until you're in that category and you really just want to be in the conversation, you need to tell me what's exciting. Not necessarily what's different, but what's going to really sell this experience for somebody. And you need to give that information to me in a way where I can understand it, accept it, curate it, and carefully communicate it to my selling team.
You're just eloquent. I could just listen to you talk all day, Rebecca.
I just like it's can I just have that soundbite on a loop?
Face for podcasting.
Yes.
Gosh, you're amazing.
So what you said there, just to unpack it a little bit more.
Of course.
What you are looking for as a retailer is not the same as what a Kickstarter is looking for, what a customer facing is looking for.
Absolutely not.
You are talking about knowing your audience. And so, or even a publisher. So yes, when you're a designer is making, and I think this is a lot of smaller publishers because they are designers first and publishers second, that I see this exactly what you're saying happening. They make a sell sheet for a publisher instead of a sell sheet for a retailer. And new and unique and all of that, great for a publisher who doesn't, they're going to say, what's different? Like you get that all the time from, which I have my own feels on. But what's new, what's different, what makes this stand out from the crowd? Okay, sure, fine. A retailer is looking for what they can sell to a customer, and the average customer is not the alpha gamer. The average customer is coming in and you're saying, this is what you liked this game. Here is another game of that genre that you will also enjoy because it has that transition, that familiarity. And sure, yes, you want it to be not the exact same game but maybe you do. Like have you seen how many country songs sound exactly the same in the world? People like familiarity. It's easier. They don't want to, most people for their entertainment don't want to have to reinvent the wheel every time they sit down to play a game, which is not the alpha gamer, which is totally different experience. But you as a retailer know what the ratio of that is in your store, I'm sure.
Yeah, and Julie, you've identified a really important point in terms of selling experience. Alpha gamers are going to come into the store and they're going to drive our curation. Someone's going to come in and they're going to say, I know and love and have read 25 articles and watched 3 videos and seen everything the publisher solicited, and I can't believe you're not yet backing this Kickstarter. And we're going to say, okay, does that Kickstarter have a retailer level? Can we get in touch with them? What's that look like? Yes, we're backing the Kickstarter. Yes, you can pre-order it through us. Thank you for driving our curation. That is our relationship to alpha customers. Right. They are amazing. They're important parts of the functioning core of a retail hobby store. They're not the only people I'm selling to.
Right.
And when those people come in, I don't need we're a passion-based industry. We really are. We are selling to people who love and get excited about things. I don't need and can't, I just don't have the spoons available to love and get passionate and excited about everything. My passion is connecting people to the things they're excited about. My passion is running this store. So when a customer comes in and they're like, I'm looking for the next thing to be excited about, they're coming to me for excitement. They're coming to me for the fun in a box experience. And I'm turning to them and saying, well, I know a little bit about this game, but it might be worth looking more into. It seems really interesting and similar to things you've liked. I point them in that direction. They're going to go off and they're going to read everything about it. They're going to connect with the publisher resources that you should make sure are available through digital means, through assets, reviews. The kind of things that you can get for your product are important to produce, but they're not important to connect me to. You don't need to give me the 35-minute YouTube tutorial explaining how to play your roll and write game. That just isn't something that I'm going to watch or care about.
Right.
But I do need to know that it's a new roll and write. It's aggressively priced. It hits this theme, which has been popular for the last year, and it's coming out in Q4 this year.
Boom. Right there. And are there specifics, like, I can't remember the specific media kit, for retailers, like, what do you need in terms of like marketing that will help get their attention?
So this is going to be a bit of a best fit problem. And the real answer to best fit problems is to have lots of options. In our store, we have rolling advertising happening on a series of TVs that occupy the game and the retail space. So high quality art assets are useful to me, especially that are already formatted in a useful way. And I can manipulate and put branding or can put unique information on. Promotional information that doesn't have US MSRPs written on it is really useful for us as Canadian marketers, but also for anybody who exists in a marketplace where their selling point could be different because retail circumstances are unique. And I think Gamma loves to use the term agility when describing independent retail. We're flexible and we change and we move a lot. I think it's also important to acknowledge that agility when talking about the circumstances. I think retail stores are a little bit like hermit crabs, right? We crawl into unusual locations and we make it our home. And sometimes your marketplace says, you know, your rent is incredibly expensive and you're selling boutique style and your products are expensive, but you're catering to a marketplace that loves games and doesn't really care about stickers. Sometimes your prices are quite cheap and you're catering to a marketplace where you're selling them what they can afford and you're connecting with different things. So listing MSRPs on customer-facing promotional material is not something I would suggest ever doing.
Okay.
And that includes your box, which a lot of people put their sticker price on, and that is not always a
They print it on
synergistic
the
relationship. Indeed they do, Julie.
What?
Don't do that if you
Okay.
have any opportunity to do
Like
otherwise.
it's a book?
You know, it's a book, yeah. Sometimes more obvious than that too.
Like as part of the UPC or it on like a splash on the front?
Sometimes on the front, yeah. I've seen it on the front. Often, like UPC level is common enough. People think they're in the book industry, which is a whole different problem.
I'm trying not to have a judgy face, and I fully have a judgy face.
Oh, I have a judgy face.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I'm trying to immediately. My brain is like, okay, what is the counter viewpoint that is driving that? I'm guessing that they don't want to fall victim to, you know, those changes in MSRP. They don't like. What's the word? I'm like blanking on.
Here's the problem with that, Rachel. If you're going to describe yourself as falling victim to changes in MSRP, which can be seasonal or industrial, sometimes you see a product's price drop significantly because of Amazon discounting or other large store discounting or an unreasonable relationship. Sometimes the price of a product is devalued due to counterfeiting, which we're seeing a lot of in the board game industry right now. Sometimes the price of a product shifts and fluctuates because the industry circumstances change. We've seen that enormously in the last year where logistics have gotten a lot more expensive. Shipping has been a lot more difficult. Supply issues have been really challenging. Right now, if you told me that you were going to give me 10 copies of a game that everyone was looking for that I haven't been able to get for over a year, I might be inclined to charge a little bit more for those copies because, you know, obviously there's the business aspect of it. If I make a good amount of money on those products, it makes up for the fact that I haven't been able to turn those SKUs for over a year and I have costs associated with that operation. There's also a somewhat altruistic element of it. If I make those games a little bit more resistant as a buying decision to the people who are on the fence about them, I get to connect them to the people who are very, very passionate about them and interested and excited about paying more for them. So price points change, they go down, they're resistant to those things. Price points go up too, and often for very good reasons that are important to us in the industry.
So I'm going to bring up, you know, Allison saying, I like books, I worked at Barnes & Noble, so prices were always in the titles. And I would like to point out, because yes, that's why I said like books. And I had my judgy face because part of the reason, because I love books, and yes, they always have them in the title, but the cost of printing a book is incredibly different than the cost of printing a board game. And that book is being sold to a specific market, much like in the United States, you know, like, so you have to know what your market is. So if I'm selling it, most books have the ability to print a certain amount and then change that number based on cost, based on where it's being, so whether it's in euros, whether it's in pounds, whether it's in any market, they are able to make that change more easily, and sometimes they don't, and it's still a problem. Versus a board game where I have to do a completely different print run just to make any change at all of any kind. And that print run, if it's not 3,000 or above, I'm getting price gouged on the cost of materials. So I don't want to make a separate, you know, if it's in English, I don't want to make a change based on the money value for all English speaking countries that I'm selling my board game to. So yeah, for that very specific pragmatic reason alone, I don't want that, which is why I had judgy face personally.
Good rationale. Good rationale.
Do you have a response for Miss Allison, who I love and adore, but disagree with on this point?
I mean, I'm not necessarily sure that you definitely do disagree with her. I mean, like, I think that's an observation that can be also interpreted as a criticism. I don't love price points on books either. We sell books. We sell a fair stock of books, and sometimes those price points are useful. Sometimes the industry demands require that you adhere to them, and on things like RPG books, specifically the Wizards of the Coast popular Dungeons and Dragons line, those price points often don't leave us tolerable margins, or alternatively, the sticker price points don't leave us marketplace competitive. The relationships to price points are very complicated, and I think good retailers should be given license to make those decisions for themselves and see operational success or failure as a function of that.
Yeah, she says she did. She meant the opposite. She meant what I meant.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and then I did remember what I was talking about was map policy, which that is an interesting conversation to have with a retailer.
We can definitely have that conversation. So map policy is a complicated issue because it exists in context, like a lot of these things that we've talked about already. I think map is ultimately intended to protect retailers from online discounters. It's a publisher-retailer relationship where publishers are looking for the value of their product to be sustained at a competitive level, and the retailers are looking to receive a higher index of profitability in exchange for building community relationships that create market for that game. So I demo your game, I show your game to people, I teach people that game, I train my staff on selling that game, and you give me a margin that feels acceptable and allows me to continue to do that in a profitable context. That sort of social contract is broken down when a large online channel for selling the game sells it at a very, very significant discount. Now, all of a sudden, people don't think your game costs $39.99. They think it says $39.99, but if you look, you can get it for $24.99. That's a $25 game. Ooh. And that has an effect on what your game is, right? It has an effect on what people perceive it to be. And it has an effect on my ability to sell that game effectively. Games where I can sell them at the margin that I need to continue to do the business that I'm doing, which is to say training and building communities around games, they're the ones that are going to thrive and succeed in the store. If a game routinely cannot be sold at the price point I need to sell for it to justify the space it takes up as a portion of my rent, as a portion of my turn rate in a storefront, and as time in terms of the mental energy required by my staff to train and to understand the game, well, then all of a sudden I can't bother stocking it if I can't make the margin I need to make on it. So MAP is supposed to protect that relationship. It's supposed to prevent the devaluing of the sticker price of your product and continue to preserve the amicable and positive relationship that retailers have with you. There's another side to this argument. MAP is in legal complexity. Your ability to enforce MAP varies significantly by the laws of the country, and pardon me. And that's not always unambiguous, right? That's something that can be really, really murky water to tread in. MAP also doesn't serve the purpose it's doing if you haven't considered all of the logistical elements. There are distributors who I'm not going to name who have relationships in various different countries where their MAP policies have not left available the margin for retailers to succeed, or where their MAP policies in one country are so different from their MAP policies in another country that they aren't serving the purpose they're asking for. I'm being told that this is the price you will sell this product for, which leaves me with a much smaller margin than anything else available in my store. And suddenly I'm challenged by that same question I am than by a product that's been devalued to a lower price point.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good perspective to talk about.
Alan circled us back to the other that prices on games was a vestige of old marketing habits because in the past you couldn't sell a game to stores if it wasn't on the box.
Oh, interesting.
That's
so how
old schoolness.
Yeah.
So that's fair perspective. I'm tempted to take a fairly radical position in response to that, which is, okay, so you need to sell to a wide marketplace. And I feel like the industry is growing. The industry is changing. It's broadening perspective. It's widening that perspective. there still exist some curmudgeonly folks with outdated attitudes. We talked about networking at the bar earlier in the show.
Mhm.
We might talk about pricing on games. Just because there's an opinion that might be popular doesn't mean we don't want to push back against it.
Yeah.
And I would
Right.
push back fairly firmly against that opinion
So
and say,
right, those companies who are still doing it because that's
yes.
the way we've always done it does not
Yes.
mean
Or even if they're doing it because Joe, who's owned Dungeon Basement games for 55 years, won't buy your game if you don't have a sticker on it. You might have a responsibility to educate Joe about your product, or you might have a desire and maybe even a need to exclude Joe from your market decisions as you want to open it up to the Rebeccas of the world.
right.
Mhm.
I knew Alan didn't agree. Like he just posted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew he didn't agree with it. He was just sharing why that was a practice.
Like that's fair
Yes.
perspective, and it's also a fair rebuttal that I might see. So even if, Alan, that's not your argument, I would still want to push back against the nature of that argument.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
So
That
thank
way
you for
it's
bringing
just
it up for us
educational.
to have the conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
Which yes, I think that there's a lot of that we have changed. So I mean, and Rachel and I have not been in the industry for
Mhm.
as long as Joe's Dungeon Basement game store, which
Yep.
by the way is the best name ever.
Absolutely.
But and even in the time that I have been part of the industry, not industry adjacent, not a fan of, but in the industry has been just a little over a decade. In that time, the significant changes that have happened since then. So knowing that you constantly have to be challenging yourself, which is another hat. I know that's difficult for retail store owners, for publishers, for people in the industry to constantly be reflecting and saying, is this still valid? Is this practice still valid? Are we still doing this? Is a lot of, I get it, it's a lot of mental labor, but it's a worthwhile labor to do when you know that that's how the industry is growing, and hopefully for the better, because that's what I believe it is. However, goodness, we're chatty today, and I'm loving it.
This is great.
Besides all of that, are there any other challenges that have happened to you this year? You know, like
I don't know. COVID.
pandemic.
Yeah. So, okay, the pandemic was really two pandemics.
Yeah.
You could argue three. Okay,
Awesome.
so let's talk about those in sequence. I'm going to start with the third one, which isn't necessarily a fundamental. Everything's intersectional. My apologies. The third challenge is the acknowledgement of the systemic inequality that exists in the post-capitalist society we've been living in for a long period of time, under the microscope of the problem of what essential work looks like.
Yeah.
The relationship between work's essentiality to people's living, the fact that I can't shut down my store because I need to give people the jobs they have because their alternatives don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
When there was a period of time where government compensation existed, a sort of universal basic income plan was temporarily put into place by the Canadian government. We did shut down for a period of time. Rent relief was a complicated issue. All of these problems suddenly went under a microscope when the ethical thing to do was to have no one coming into the store, no one working in the store. But I was not able to do that for the much larger ethical qualms of not being able to fire all of my people who trusted me to keep their lives afloat.
Yep.
So that's the third pandemic. The second pandemic is obviously the major health issue going on. You know, the fact that we had to deal with mask regulations, fluctuating government regulations around are we open, aren't we open, what does curbside pickup look like, inventing basically from scratch a web store interface, using that to market to delivery in town, shipping across the country. Can we ship to the US? Can we ship to the UK? What do those things look like? Building new relationships with FedEx and Canada Post, stuff that could easily have been part of our business model before, and in various points had been a small part of it, but now became our entire relationship to business.
Yeah.
I suddenly was spending 30% of my week, which, as we've established, I did not have available to spend, looking up details about viral infectivity, RNA load, what it meant to show risks and to share risks. Because as I said, I had a friend in the industry who died of COVID not that long ago, and it was because he was exposed in an environment that was running events. We canceled our events. They were more than half of our business. We accepted uncomfortable realities. We worked people from home. We developed what the working relationship was from home. We changed HR practices. That was the second part of the pandemic. The third part, how shall I say this gently? Not everyone got it. And some people doubled down on that in a pretty scary way. This is perhaps true more in the US than it is in Canada, but we had that experience here. And the real pandemic was the friends you lost along the way. It was frightening. I'm worried about my team. I'm worried about my family. I'm worried about the families of the people who we support in the store. And I said to Jay really early in this process, we have to think about who in our community is going to die here, and if we have a part in that. And some people got that really quickly. Some people felt that was a bit melodramatic, and some people never got it. And I was sad to see them go, but I definitely needed to let them go. Because the stakes were very real and very dangerous. And I think I aim to be an ethical person first and a businesswoman second. And if I wanted to be a businesswoman first, there are other industries I could be working in.
Fair. That's a quotable right there.
That is so, agreed.
Wow.
We are an industry based around community. So you have to put community in the forefront. And if you're being selfish, that's not. And that's hard because you also have to your point, you have those other responsibilities, and you just summed up the entirety of all of those responsibilities as a retail store owner very well.
Absolutely.
Which is why I wanted to ask you the question, because I had a feeling you were going to handle that quite well. And you did.
I have been accused before of having opinions.
Yep.
Hey, I love it.
Yep. Or as Amy said, you are brilliant with a lovely heart.
Brilliant.
That's so sweet, Amy. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. It's just, I just love listening. So, okay, to kind of finish up with the last question here, I want to say, so mass market, Kickstarter, they're viewed as your direct competitors.
Oh, that's...
do you think that is a fair assumption, or do you obviously there's some content there, but do you, how do we help you have that less competitive?
Sure. Yeah. Mass market isn't our competition. Mass market's the introductory experience people learn about getting into games. And then when they want more, they come to me. You don't think about, like a 4-liter tin of vanilla ice cream and Ben and Jerry's as direct competitors. You think about that as different experiences, right? I'm the curated, deeper experience. I'm the person you come to for expertise. I'm the event space. I'm the passion. This is becoming a big part of my life and I'm really excited about it. Or being a board gamer is part of my identity. Or I love board games on my Tinder profile and I want to really get that where it needs to be, right? Yeah. I'm here for people who are really excited about connecting with it.
How do you feel about board games?
And you know what? That's an important first date question.
Which way you swiping?
Yeah.
Right.
So mass market industry, when we talked about seeing big box stores get into more kind of new games, Target stocking more than the Monopoly and Risks of the world.
Right.
That's a great thing for our industry. That represents a trend that we can capitalize on effectively. Now, does that mean there's a race to the bottom on pricing of some of those products? There could be, and that could be a part of what's happening for you, right? But there's also an opportunity there, right? Because Target's never going to sell 16 expansions for Catan. Well, they might actually, but they're not going to sell the depth and breadth of the experience that we are. They're not going to offer a tournament experience. They're not going to they're not going to be everything that we are. So if they start taking away some of the core turn rate products from the profitability of our experience, we need to look at what other parts of our industry have the potential for profitability. Are your retail events profitable? Because if they're not, you might need to consider what's happening there. Are your ancillary and secondary market sales, like singles or used products, profitable? Because if they're not, consider very seriously if you're in those markets you possibly should be. What's your relationship to someone moving out of some of those games and moving into deeper, more complicated strategy games? Are you purchasing their old products? Are you helping connect them with communities that are bridging those sales for you? What are you doing to capitalize on the opportunity presented by mass market being more present in our industry? I think mass market is different from large online retail discounters, not necessarily in practice, but certainly in presence. I don't need a competitor who only the very serious gamers know about, who just drives price down. What I need is a competitor who might drive some prices down, but is getting every customer I haven't been able to get to walk into my store yet.
Nice.
And my favorite Ben & Jerry's flavor is if I had a million flavors, which is the Bare Naked Ladies licensed product,
Yes!
where they donate a portion of their proceeds to charity. It's like Rocky Road meets white chocolate, which is also kind of maybe a statement about my life.
The best. I don't know how to end that any better. That is so perfect. Oh my gosh. I have
Awesome.
all the chills
Yay,
and the
Friday.
amazing. Oh, this is great. The best. Okay, so the step one. We're like,
so somebody's watched this. They are now like, wow, all of that sounds amazing. Sign me up. I want to start a retail store. What is their step one?
So starting a retail, there's an old, what's the adage? If you want to make $1 million running a game store, start with 2. Know that this is a passion industry. It's driven by people who are excited about doing that work. It's a dream of many people, and it's not instantly profitable. There's money to be made, but you should have money in the bank for your first 2 years and $100,000 to open your store, and that's a conservative estimate. You need to reach out and form good relationships with distributors. Your distributors are going to be the core of where you get your product. Direct relationships with people selling a handful of SKUs aren't appropriate for an introductory retailer. It's smarter to have a distributor with a wide catalog of products who you can get terms with and start building relationships with toward profitability. They give you access to indirect capital at really good relationship rates, and they have the potential to help you build an initial stock offering. After that, you want to determine what your market looks like. You want to understand, and you want to be adaptable. We started out as primarily a miniatures game store that dabbled in a handful of other things. When those things grew really rapidly, we had to be flexible and adapt to those things as well. Ultimately, flexibility is really, really important.
Wow. So obviously, Rebecca is a complete fount of wisdom, and there are so many more questions that she'd be willing to share with you.
Feel free to reach out to me if anyone's watching the show and wants to. I'm very accessible.
Yes, you can find out more information about her store at blackknightgames.ca. And wow, I am just I'm going to be processing this for a while.
That was a good talk. I learned. I laughed. I cried. It was better than cats.
Wow, that's the Friday morning of Better Than Sex, Julie. Thank you.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Okay. Julie, what do you have going on this week?
Well, this past week, I was doing a lot ramping up game dev. So, which is speaking of safety and space, and I know you're in the wilds there.
Yes,
now.
Exactly.
So that's Tabletop Simulator, where I'm doing my playtesting with my playtest group right now. Still not in person, but that's okay. We're working our way slowly until everybody's vaccinated. So starting to do playtesting, tweaking things, making stuff happen for game yet to be announced, still in spoiler mode. And then retail release of Folklore, Follow the Spire, second major expansion for Folklore. That's me.
Great. And for me, I still wanted to talk a little bit about last week's thing I did. I was recently able to become more involved with the Great Plains Gaming Project, which is a local nonprofit that has gaming and bringing more people to the hobby at its core. And the actual organization is the sponsor of the Great Plains Gaming Festival, which I will be helping organize, and would love sponsors and things like that. It's a local regional con here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And so I'm going to be diving into that, and we're working on the timeline because it is going to be in mid-August. So we are already working hard. And I had my little picture of my pirate ship there because I was also doing some fun. I've been having a lot of fun with these Instagram flat lays, and I am just really enjoying being able to tell stories with photos. So
that's really cool. When is it, sir?
The regional convention is going to be August 13th through the 15th. So lots and lots of fun to see all of our gamers coming back out that are going to be hopefully nice and safe. So, all right, next week we are going to have a B2B conversation with Maggie Taylor Clayton from Greater Than Games. Julie, do you have any spoilers on that?
Do I have spoilers of that? Well, Maggie's been doing sales. She comes from a big business background. She is the little goth daughter I never had, and
Yes.
she's emo. She's of that next generation, but
Oh,
I adore her, and she is very smart, and I am very much looking forward to what she has to say from her perspective on how she works with B2B sales.
yes, very exciting. All right. Well,
yeah. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it was so good.
All the talks were good talks.
Yes, absolutely.
This awesome session was sponsored this week by XYZ Game Lab. So once you're done here, go see all the cool things they are doing.
You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Pinterest. All of the links are in the description box below.
Enjoy your Friday, everyone. And remember, next week, you're invited.